Rick Scott of Florida proposed a plan. I wish I had enough copies to hand, but go online and look at it. Proposed a plan requiring Congress to vote on the future of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid every 5 years. It's up for reauthorization. And I want to remind you, you paid for your Social Security. Every single paycheck from the time you were a kid, you paid for it. So every 5 years, Congress gets to vote, change, cut, reduce, or eliminate the entirety of Social Security.
Imagine what it would be like to have a Democratic Party that sounds like that, not just when we're approaching midterms or general election, but when, it's the middle of the year, there's no campaigning happening, and they actually mean what they say. That would be amazing, right? It would be incredible. And what we've been seeing from Joe Biden in the past few weeks has been pretty good. Pretty good. He's not perfect. Obviously, I want more in terms of social spending. But I'll say that the dark Brandon label is beginning to earn it, especially when he's calling people out by name. And in that speech, which was meant, by the way, to celebrate the Inflation Reduction Act and its passage, he specifically mentioned Rick Scott. And he did that for good reason. Rick Scott is the one who's trying to promote policies that would increase taxes, not for the rich, not for corporations, but specifically for people who are so poor that they don't pay federal taxes. He wants to target them, okay? He also wants to cut Medicare and Social Security, two incredibly popular programs. And so when he heard that Biden had called him out, he decided to tweet this. Joe Biden said he wished he had enough copies of my Rescue America plan. So I stopped by the White House today to make sure he did. He also included a super goofy photo of himself holding his book. But Joe Biden responded to it. He quote tweeted it saying, "Couldn't agree more, Rick. And if anyone else wants to read your plan to put Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block, they should go to joebiden.com/Rick Scott's plan. Thanks for stopping by." So this is something, John, that I've been trying to get Democrats, trying through our show, of course, which isn't really as effective because they probably aren't paying attention. But nonetheless, having a message that specifically attacks Republicans and how they want to make people's lives materially worse is much smarter than just simply, whatever else they've engaged in recent decades, right? I feel like they also engage in whatever issue. It could be culture, it could be identity. Not to say that those issues are unimportant, but they tend to lean on those issues in lieu of talking about what matters to all voters, which is their financial stability, their economic health. That kind of stuff matters too. Healthcare, here we're talking about Medicare as well. And so I like the messaging here, and I wish that he continued it.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, I begin to speak extremely worried about what's going to happen. But the only way that it could have been stronger is if, with it being Rick Scott and the topic being Medicare, Rick Scott's history of massive fraud in that area, maybe he could have added that in, maybe make it a threat or something. But it is good. He's apparently decided at this point in his first term that the malarkey stops here, and that's good. I agree. There's multiple levels of good communication or good, using your position. This is better than what they normally do, or especially Democrats like Joe Biden normally do. Of course, it is not as good as actually delivering. In theory, protecting those things is better than not. Although I would add the historic context of the Democrats not over the past couple of decades occasionally standing with Republicans to put limitations or consider limitations of those things would make it an even more effective attack. But good, they haven't done that in a little bit, so that's nice. And it isn't like he hasn't delivered in the recent history with the student debt cancellation, although I have some major concerns around that have just developed this week, as well as the climate change bill. But while I agree, I like the new Dark Brandon. I want to see more of it in terms of the rhetoric. As I've said, initially, once they pass student loan debt, it's only going to last so long. You need to keep actually delivering.
Yes.
And maybe some people would say, well, we're so close to an election, I just don't think that they're going to do it again. Well, first of all, that's a great time to do something. But there's a lot of problems that he could still unilaterally solve. And so I want to see that at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's not just about the rhetoric. You do have to deliver. I think that the student debt forgiveness plan by Biden is, I mean, obviously I'd like to see way more. But you actually shared a statistic with me a week ago that just blew my mind about how the amount of debt that will be forgiven, which is somewhere between $10,000 to $20,000, depending on whether or not you needed Pell Grants when you were going to school, it actually ends up wiping out 50% of student loan debt for Latinx borrowers, which is incredible. That statistic is incredible. So I really don't want to minimize that and the positive impact it has. But for me, what was even more impressive about that debt forgiveness plan is what happens with the amount that you're expected to pay back in your student loans. It's dependent on what your discretionary income is, and Biden capped it at 5% of your discretionary income, meaning, money that you have left over after paying for shelter, paying for your necessities, right, to survive, which means for most people, 5% of that might be nothing because of how expensive it is to live in America at this point, especially in some of these big cities. So I don't want to erase that either. But I agree with you about the need to continue with the wins, making people whole, passing policies that make their economic situation far more stable, far more healthy. And to just quickly reference what you were talking about regarding Democrats sometimes joining Republicans in the call to cut Social Security. Remember, Obama was open to that. It was part of his so-called grand bargain. He was willing to concede some cuts to Social Security to get Republicans on board with other policies that he was trying to implement. In the end, it didn't work out, and I'm happy it didn't work out. But it's really nice to see that difference between Obama and Biden. And Social Security recipients are actually going to see a pretty decent jump in the amount of money they receive through Social Security under Biden. So they're actually going to get more money under Biden's leadership. And I think that's also a good thing.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know if we have time to go into the details on Rick Scott's plan, but I love the production you've done for that, because I had forgotten just how awful it was. Like, honestly, all I want is for the national conversation leading up to the midterms to be about Rick Scott's plan, because I think that's as good as Lindsey Graham trying to do a national abortion ban, I think.
No, totally. And this is why Mitch McConnell slapped him down, because he's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, this is not good. Don't propose that low income earners have to pay minimum tax, federal tax. That's insane. That's not going to be popular. Nonetheless, that part of his proposal was actually taken out because of how incredibly unpopular it is. But make no mistake, what he's proposing currently is pretty terrible. So children will be forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance, salute the flag, and learn about how America is awesome in school. So that's part of his plan. There's a lot of culture war stuff in here, right? Government can no longer ask citizens to disclose race or ethnicity on government forms. Gee, I wonder why they want that. They want to refund and respect the. How do you enforce that? How do you enforce that? How do you? Okay, the whole notion of refunding the police. Let me just note, any municipality that actually attempted to cut police funding immediately reversed that decision. So congratulations, your refund the police proposal has already happened. Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to mention is you can't enforce respect for the police. What does that even mean? I mean,
Anna, I feel like that's sort of been the de facto rule for a long time. Right? It's not like a law from Congress, but the cops certainly expect it. And if you don't respect the police, they'll give you some punishments right on the spot, actually.
They really do want to live in a country that they can dub land of the free, home of the brave, right? I mean, land of the free obviously means that you should immediately defer to cops and respect them. And it should be enforceable. It should be a part of our rule of law. Insane. Okay, so let's continue. Finish building the border wall and name it. Name it after Trump, because, of course, he wants to do right by his daddy. Stopping socialism He proposes that we shrink the federal government, reduce the government workforce by 25% in 5 years, and sell government buildings and assets. So that goes along with his, hey, we want to cut all funding to any program that actually benefits people, makes their lives better. Eliminate all federal programs that can be done locally and enact term limits for Congress. And stop left-wing efforts to rig elections. Are you going to go after Lindsey Graham too? Is he also rigging elections with his anti-abortion proposal? Protect, defend, and promote the American, aka nuclear family. Men and then of course the same transgender, anti-transgender bigotry. Men are men, women are women. So there's a lot of culture war stuff in there, but. Well, you should also read in between the lines and see that he wants to, yes, cut Social Security and Medicare and cut government programs that help needy Americans.
Yeah, well, I mean, the issue is that there aren't enough details here. So if we're supposed to protect, defend, and promote the American family, obviously then you need to have consequences for people who violate the traditional nuclear family. So with Trump having multiple families and kids with multiple people, how many years in prison should he spend, Rick Scott? I mean, that's totally not the nuclear family. Well, I guess it's nuclear families. Maybe he'll like that. Rudy Giuliani, how many times can he, how many times can he get divorced? How many times can he cheat on his wives? That's a violation, a spitting in the face of the nuclear family. So what fine should he pay? 50,000, 100,000? I would love to know. Or is this only about gay people? No, this is really only about gay people, isn't it? Yeah. Fun.
Yeah. I mean, they're so innovative with their policy proposal. I mean, who could have expected this? Such big-brained ideas.